Okay, so I think a natural thing to do now would be to actually create a form so that we can create a new post from within our application. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll minimize this, and in fact we can just stop the server. And we'll go into our post controller. So we'll head up here into post controller, and we'll scroll down. And it's really up to you how you like to structure your classes. In general, one of the things that I like to do is to store private methods sort of grouped towards the bottom of the particular class that I'm working in. Just kind of keeps them out of the way and keeps all of the methods that the class is actually exposing towards the top of the file. Some people do it the other way around, but in any case, I think at the very least it's nice to keep your private methods grouped separately from your public methods if they're all going to be in the same file. So what we'll do here is we'll create a new public IActionResult create, and we're going to pass this an ID, and note that this will be the forum ID. So I'm just going to make a note here. And in fact, we could name this and then specifically name it in our view so that it gets passed correctly. But I'm okay with passing it as ID for now, and we'll change it to forum ID here in the future in a little bit, and I'll show you what I mean by naming it in our form so that it gets passed correctly. In any case, we need to go ahead and grab the forum that we want to create a post for. So we'll say our forum service .get by ID, this ID, and yeah, we need to actually inject a forum service into our post controller. So we'll create another private read-only field here for iForum, which is our forum service, and we'll set it here. Okay, so we'll come down to our create method here, and we'll return a new view model to our page. So we have a new, call it new post model. We'll need to actually create now. And then, of course, we're going to just return this model to the page once we've built it. So I'll come over here and under models, post, we'll create a new class called new post model. And just as always, it's public, and we'll need just a few things on it here. We'll have say a forum name to make it simple, just to get the forum name that we're posting to on that page. Forum ID, so that we know what forum to actually target when we actually send that up to our database, and that'll be an int. And the author name. And then the forum image URL, so that we can see a picture to get some visual feedback when we're creating a new post, rather than pass everything that we need off the forum into the view, just those few things. And so that should suffice for now. So we'll head back here now into our create method and just go ahead and set those properties. So we'll have forum name is equal to the forum.title. And we're getting an error that forum name is inaccessible, and that is because for some reason I did not put public in front of all of these properties, which we need to do. Okay, so we did that. And so now back in our post controller, we can start setting them properly. So forum ID is going to be the ID off of that forum that we get back, of course. The forum image URL is going to be equal to the forum.image URL. And now you may be wondering, how are we actually going to get the author name? Well, if we're visiting the create post page, we're actually going to be the author of that post, presumably. So what we can do in our controller here, because we've already implemented identity, is using the user object that we have access to, and this is of type claims principal, I believe. So what this is it's actually getting the user from the particular context, the HTTP context in which we're working. So when I'm logged in and visiting the page, this represents me, or my claims principal. And on this, we have this identity property. And this is the claims identity associated with this current user. And from that, we can actually get the username. We can also do things like check if that user is authenticated and work with this object in a number of different ways, which we'll see in the future here when we have things like users who are admin users, for instance. In our case, we just need to actually get the author name here, and we can get that off of this identity property. So yeah, this is pretty nice. It's all kind of bundled for us because of this claims principal user object. And again, this name is just going to correspond to that particular user for which this entire process is running. So we can actually make pretty good use of it. Okay, so that in a nutshell will define the entire view model for our create view, but we also need a way to actually add the post to the database, of course. So this is enough to essentially just kind of show a page that we can put a form on, but on that page we want to be able to have a post button that when we click it, it actually triggers some events that actually cause Entity Framework to take the input from that form and shove it into our post table in the database, as well as anything else that we actually want to work with. And so for that to happen, we're going to need to create another method in this controller that has this HTTP post attribute on it. And what this is going to do is when we have a form of method type post, it's going to actually trigger this method that we define here, whatever we put under this attribute. Otherwise, say with like a typical GET request, we won't be able to actually hit this method. And so what I'm going to do is actually make this an asynchronous task. And to use task, we'll need to bring in the threading.tasks namespace. And the type will still be an action result. And we'll just call this add post. And we're going to pass it our new post model from the page. And what we're going to do is sort of the reverse of what we've been doing in terms of getting data back from our services. So in general, what we're doing is we're like taking data from our database in the form of these raw entity models, and then sort of pushing them into our custom view models so that we can display some information to the user. In this case, we're taking information from the user in the form of a view model, and then we need to actually transform that back into a type of entity model that Entity Framework can then push into our database. So the post that we're going to build, we'll build in a private method here, build post, and we'll pass it this post model, and we're also going to pass it a user variable, and we're going to build that here. And the way that I'm going to build that is with a user ID variable, and we're going to use this built-in user manager service, and there's a get user ID on it that we can pass this claims principal, current user using the form. And so let's go to the top of this class. Oops, and of course we need to bring in our form service from earlier. And now we need to bring in this user manager with type application user. And we'll call it user manager, and we'll control period here to bring it in. This is made available to us again from the identity membership system. So I'm actually going to create a private static field to store this. Say user manager. Oops. And then we'll go ahead and set it here. And all this is doing for us, well, I should say all it's doing for us because it's extremely useful, is it's going to provide the APIs for interacting with the users in our data store. So in this case, our application user type. So let's go ahead and scroll down here. And so yeah, we can use the user manager to get the user ID, passing it, again, this claims principal. If you take a look at what else is on here, I mean, there's like a ton on the user manager. we can check their password, we can actually like delete a user and find all these various different properties on them, this sort of thing. There's quite a lot of functionality here. In our case, we're simply using it to get the user ID. Now, given that user ID, I'm going to use the user manager to actually find the instance of that application user object from our data store. You can use that with this find by ID async, pass it the user ID, and then this is an asynchronous task. So what we should do here is say await. Okay, so that is actually going to get us our application user from our data store. And now I can pass this build post method that we need to build both the view model that we have, which will contain like the post content that's getting posted up, as well as some information about the user themselves actually posting this. So I'm going to go ahead and control period here to scaffold out this private build post method. And this isn't just an object, but it is a post. And so let's go ahead and build this out. So we're, like I said, building this backwards from a view model into an entity model this time. So we're going to return new post, and the title will be the post model dot title. Oops, which looks like we need to actually add. The content will also be the model.content, which we need to add. Created, we'll just say datetime.now. The user will be this user that we passed build post method. Now let's go into our new post model and add those missing properties of title and content. Okay, so we'll head back here. And so now we've built this actual post entity model using the new post model, view model that we have on this add post page, as well as some information about the user that's actually building that post, and using that new post form that we'll build. Okay, and so now that we have this post entity model, we can actually just use our post service to invoke entity framework to go ahead and just make that insert into our database. So we'll say await post service.add post, because this is going to be an asynchronous task. And then we'll go ahead and return, this time we're going to return a redirect to action. And we'll return back to the post that was just actually created. So we can use this syntax, redirect to action. We're going to specify the action and then the controller and then some route values here. And if we had more than one thing to pass here, we could pass in a new object and the framework will actually generate the URL for us. In this case, we just have one thing to pass, which would be the post ID. And that should be accessible to us because of the fact that we have saved our changes to the database inside of our post service. In any case, it should be available to us after we make that save. Okay, and just to give you kind of a peek of the user rating system that we'll be building in the future, this is where we'll also implement, let's say to do, and we'll implement like user rating management here. So for instance, if when users make a post, they get some new kind of rating bump. This is where we'll implement that in the near future.